rap artists like 50 Cent. He the one that discovered 50 Cent. If it wasn't for Dr. Dre, you wouldn't have rap artists like Eminem. And if it wasn't for Dr. Dre, you won't have The Game, and the list goes on. So when Tupac met with Suge Knight basically said, I'm gonna bail you out of prison, and no matter what, your enemies is my enemies. And at this time, Suge already had a name in the streets. This was a guy about 6'8" or whatever he was, 300-something pounds, and he already had a name for himself. And he made Pac comfortable. He said, no matter who your enemies is, once I bail you out, they be my enemies. And Pac, he took the offer from him and said, basically, I'll sign a record deal to Death Row Records. So eventually, he bailed Pac out, and we flew to Los Angeles, California. And when we came to Los Angeles, California, the first thing Pac wanted to do was hit the studio. The only thing that was on his mind is that he wanted to go and he wanted to record records. And he started to record an album called All Eyes on Me. And on this album myself, I think I performed about 6 songs on this album. And this album also sold 20 million records worldwide. So this was like another step for me. One day I'm a drug dealer that got locked up the same day. Then the next day I'm on one record that sold 3 million. Now I'm on a record that sold 20 million records. I remember we was touring the world. This time he was the #1 rap artist. He was breaking Elvis Presley records at this time. I'm talking about we were going to the mall, they would shut the mall down. We were just living a life that even myself, I can vouch that I didn't think that it would come to an end. And then if anybody else is familiar with Pac, they will also remember that in most of his music, he always spoke about death. Most of his music, he had songs where he even said that he wanted to kill his own self. And he had songs where he used to always say he felt like his enemies is chasing him. He felt like he's going to die. He used to always say, will I make it to be 23? Will I make it to be 21? He always would speak about how he's going to die. And a lot of people might not know from the outside looking in, it might sound like just good music, but a lot of people don't know that Pac really had a lot of odds against him. He was born, for example, to 2 Black Panther parents. And Black Panther Party was a movement back in the day, like a civil rights movement, etc. And even to the point when Pac Moms was pregnant with him. When she was pregnant with Pac, the FBI came to her house, put a shotgun to her stomach, and arrested her. She was facing 165 years in prison while she was pregnant with Pac. And she couldn't afford a lawyer, so she had to represent herself. She said she went to the library, she read, and eventually she beat the case. Even to this day, they got her case in the Guinness Book of World Records. So Pac said he remembered growing up that he had a very hard life. He remembered that he never could settle down. He'd be in this house. Next thing he knows, times his mother and the aunties and them are running the house, pack all your clothes, the FBI's on our heels, we got to move to this city. And he remembered that he was going through that growing up. And he said that when he became a rap artist, he started doing music for the African American community, but then them same individuals turned on him. He was going in and out of jail. For example, the lawsuit when he shot the 2 police, the off-duty police, he was spending a lot of money for that. He was everywhere he go, people would start fights with him, he'd get arrested, he was spending a lot of money to the point that he felt he couldn't take it anymore. And there's times that we would sit in his living room and we would have conversations with him, and he would say, man, I feel like going in the garage, and I feel like just turning the car on, and I feel like just killing myself. Literally, he used to really talk like that. But I remember when he came to Death Row Records and he started to sell millions of these records, and he put this record out, All Eyes on Me, he started to make money. To one point, Pac just bought like a brand new Bentley or a Rolls Royce. And I remember he bought a house in Malibu, California. Everybody I'm sure is familiar with Malibu. Literally the backyard of his house was the ocean. So when he was in Malibu, California, we would sit down one time, and we used to always, at times, just go into his living room, and we just had conversations, you know what I mean? And at this time, the conversation that we was having with Pac was more serious. And Pac started conversating with him. He said, you know how I used to always talk about how I don't want to live anymore, how I want to die. He said, now that I have this house, now that I have this money, he said, I want to live on. And this was a surprise and shocking to me because I used to see that this guy was really chasing after death. He said, now I want to live. But unfortunately, a few months later, Pac, he got shot up in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. So when this happened, when it first happened, when I first got the call, I was in his house, and I first got the call that Young Noble called me. I called the house when Young Noble was in Pac's house. I stepped out his house, as a matter of fact, and I called the house, and I remember Young Noble, one of the members of the Outlawz, he said, Pac just called for you, and for some reason, he just said he want to speak to you because he just knocked this dude out. If anybody remember the video thing, and he said he want to speak to you. I'm like, why he want to speak to me? And also later on, Gaddafi and Edie and Castro, they was with him. And they said as soon as Pac got in the elevator, he was pumped up. And the first person he said is called Moo. They used to call me Moo. And he said, call Napoleon, call him, tell him I just knocked this dude out. Call him. Even to this day, I don't know why he wanted to tell me this, because I never ever got to speak to him. And I don't know why he wanted to just tell me that he knocked the dude out, because it's times we beat other people up together, you know what I mean? So even to this day, I wonder why he wanted to speak to me. Even the Outlawz still wonder, and for some reason he kept saying, call you. So when I told Noble, I said, tell Pac I'll be back in a couple hours, and he could call and I could talk to him. So I remember getting back to the house a few hours later, and young Noble ran to the gate, and I said that Pac called, and that's when he said, no, matter of fact, Gaddafi called, and we found out that Pac just got shot. Now for me, the first thing that I thought of, I said, man, Pac got shot before. He's going to make some records about it. We're going to come out, make a couple more hit-em-up songs, and we sell millions of records, and life goes on. And I remember that same night, Pac was a guy who loved guns, and he always had a house full of guns. And I remember the same night, me and Noble and Yafe, your mother, Gaddafi mother, we filled the car up with guns, and we drove to Vegas because we didn't know what to expect once we get there. And for all this time getting there, I just know Pac was going to make it. Every time, you know, we'd call his sister, we'd call Gaddafi, how's he doing? And everybody say he's looking fine. But it wasn't until when I walked into the hospital and I seen him laying in the bed, that's when it really hit me that he really just got shot up, and he really was in a position. I don't know how many people ever saw like somebody that's very close to them laying in the bed with wires down their mouth. And the way Pac was, he was a guy that never was quiet. He was very energetic. He always used to run his mouth. He always used to move. So when I seen him in that hospital bed, it was like a very hard, I really couldn't imagine, I couldn't believe that I was looking at him in that position. And for some reason, I think right there, I kind of knew that he wasn't going to make it. The way he looked, I just never seen him in a position like that. This is a guy, like I said, we lived with him. Me and the Outlawz, we lived with him. We ate breakfast with him, lunch with him, dinner with him every single day. We woke up and we seen each other every single day. We sat around the table for hours and just clowned each other. And for me to see him like that, it was very hard. And I remember me and the Outlawz, we always say we was very souped up, because we said that Pac would have saw us do what we done, he would have loved us for this, because we was young. A lot of people don't know, when we was around Pac, we was 14, 15, 16 years old. So we was a bunch of mess-ups. I'm talking about every single day he was yelling at us, I can't believe y'all doing this. Man, I'm about to get a new crew. He used to joke with us like that. Like, y'all a bunch of little boys, man. I can't believe y'all hang with you little kids. And as soon as we leave his house, he'd be calling us. Where y'all at? Come back. This and this and this. Why y'all alone? Why y'all ain't want to hang with me? He was that type of cat. And we was like, Gaddafi used to clown and said, man, I think we like the Bad New Bears. Because for us, it wasn't just music. When it came time to go in the studio, we was able to make good music. But Pac was very disciplined, and he wanted us to do all other stuff, man. We used to crash all his cars. We used to do so much stuff that we used to always mess up. He'd tell us to do something, we won't do it. So he used to say, man, I can't believe I'm taking care of a bunch of big babies. Y'all don't do none of this. So we used to always argue like that. But on this day, man, we used to say that if Pac would have seen us, he would have been proud of us, because the people that shot him, well, we don't know who it was, but they was calling the hospital saying that they're going to come up and finish him. Like every single day, the security guards in the hospital was alert, because they said people keep calling us. And I'm talking about every single day. If you can imagine, cars is just driving down the street, and they turned the hospital almost into a club. So we was very paranoid. We didn't know who to trust. We didn't know why these people were, etc. And the way they had Pac, they had him on the first floor, and they had his window facing the street. So if anybody that wanted him and knew he was in that room, they could have done something for him. And he had no security. He had no security. Nobody, before he used to have security, he was in a rapper, but for some reason, the security wasn't showing up. So what we did, we just parked the van in front of the car, right in front of his window, and I mean, we had it loaded with weapons. Every weapon you can imagine, we had it in it, and truly from the bottom of our heart, we wanted to make sure that we was protecting. This was like a brother to us. As a matter of fact, he was a brother to us. So we would park the car, we didn't care about the police or nothing. We just said, man, we're just going to hold him down. We parked the car in front of the window, and we would have shifts, like 3 Outlawz to stay there from the morning to that night, and then the rest of us to stay from night to the morning. And we were doing this every day, and we was still hoping that he would come up and we were going to tell him how we held him down. But eventually, a few days later, I remember a sister came out, and she said that my mother just pulled the plug. And for me, I really couldn't believe it. And I remember I lost it a little bit. And his sister, she was calming me down. And I remember one of the guys who took it the worst out of the Outlawz was Gaddafi. And one of the reasons Gaddafi took it worse is because he was the only one that actually literally seen the shooter. He was right behind Pac, and he described the guy, he said, I seen when he put his arm out, I seen when he looked, I seen his face, and I seen him shooting. And he said, I just couldn't believe that he was shooting Pac. And Gaddafi and Pac, they was brothers, but they wasn't blood brothers. They knew each other since they each was like 6 months old. So Pop